he was working with Philadelphia Eddie for 2 years, which he always had a clot over his leg. And Eddie was wondering why he wasn't using ink. But what he was doing, he had 6 ink caps. I think it was red, green, yellow, black, and shade. And he used to pick the ink caps up, and he used to disappear under his cloth. He used to piss in them and put them back straight down. And come on, let's go. Extending the ink.
You used the needles until the customer started bleeding profusely. At that point, you looked at the needles and you saw that one of them was like a crochet needle. It was bent over. And that it was time to change the needle bar. Okay. But you never changed needles until the needles gave out on you.
I can still remember being scared to death. And I can still remember everyone in there was scared to death. There were no chairs. You came in, you got tattooed, you left. If you weren't getting tattooed, get the hell out. It's simple as that. And there was no hand holding, and there was no let's check your aura or what's your sign or none of that. It's like, hey buddy, you want a tattoo? And you pick something off the wall and you sat down and got it.
It wasn't like I just went in and I said, hey man, I was thinking like, you know, heart with some wings and a dagger. And by the time they're done drawing it out, you know, it's been you didn't want to tell them no. You didn't like it or you wanted it bigger. You know? I mean, here's all these guys sitting around, man. I'm like, you know, you don't know if you're going to get tattooed or your ass kicked.
The stories, you know, about shaving, a lot of guys carried straight razors in their socks. I liked all that shit, rough and tumble stuff.
You never went up to somebody and just said, you know, what colors do you use? You'd never do that, you know. You had to watch and listen, and then you would say, that's a 7 mag you're using, isn't it? And you would load the question with the answer. And if it was right, you were allowed to stay a little bit longer. If it was wrong, that demoted you, you know. So I stood in the corner, I kept my mouth shut, and I watched for 3 weeks.
Bob Roberts, well, I heard a story which has been repeated to me a few times, that he was held up by a machine gun, and he left. He left the city. Tony Polito was also held up in Lefferts Boulevard in Brooklyn, Crown Heights, Brooklyn. And, you know, it was a very scary thing. Someone told me that they actually killed his front man. I mean, you know, and he's continued to tattoo. And supposedly he had a thick plexiglass cage around him where you'd stick your arm in to get the tattoo. I mean, it seems so extreme, but I mean, do what you gotta do.
Yeah, one of Dean's early shops was in a meat locker on Broadway. The store had not been a meat locker for decades, and we actually tattooed inside the freezer, which was about 1.5 feet thick because it was insulated with cork. The shops were so crowded that you stood in line to get tattooed. So you had a lot of time to stare at all the stuff on the walls while you stood in line. This was '65, so everything was left over from the Second World War. And they'd just kind of been jazzed up a little bit, maybe with a little bit more color. But you know, the images that were on the wall during early Vietnam were those same images that were on the wall in Second World War and even Korean War. The hippie kind of images hadn't come yet. So I just picked all those classic sailor tattoos. They look good. You know what I'm saying? The square knot, the eagle, the sailor girl. And it was more about not necessarily some big meaning behind it. They were just attractive images that seemed appropriate for a sailor to get. And I really kind of wanted all that old historical stuff that kind of had been done, you know what I mean? That stuff just looked good to me.
Long story, but we'll make it short. Friend of mine that I used to ride motorcycle with, he belonged to an outlaw motorcycle club. His name was Ralph, was after me for years to learn to tattoo. He wanted to get tattooed by me. He came to the house one day and he told me, he said, listen, I know this guy, Ronnie. He runs a tattoo shop. His kid is stealing from him, and he needs somebody that's honest and artistic to watch the shop and try and keep the kid from stealing too much money. And I looked at Ralph, I laughed at him and said, ah, you're fucking crazy, go away. And he pulled out a gun, stuck it in my face, and he said, no, this time I'm really, really serious. You're going with me. Well, he took me down to Ronnie's tattoo shop, and he introduced me to Ronnie. Ronnie and I hit it off, became very good friends, and I learned to tattoo in the process.
You can't learn from people today like you can learn from these guys that have been in the business. And if you take time to shut your mouth, and me, I love to talk, but you know, when you're with them, if you listen to what they say, there's so much knowledge. I mean, just listen to their stories, you know, about, I always say to new guys, man, you really missed out on the fun of this business, because there was conventions, man. The first time I went to a Pittsburgh show, you know, I walk in, there's some dude passed out in an elevator, someone's urinating on him, you know, and it was just wild, crazy, man. I mean, it was bikers, and it was a blast, you know. I mean, you come into shops down around Fort Benning, Georgia, and you know, I used to work in a couple down there, and it was just, you know, it was all bikes, it was parties, man. A guy I worked with, Falcon, walked out of the shop one day, got shot 6 times in the chest. He was nailing someone's old lady, and never turned a dude in. He lived, you know, missed his heart and his spine, but that's the way it was, man. And it was, if you open up on someone, you got to beat down. I mean, you sit around and talk to Doc Don how he kept the shop in Las Vegas for so long without anyone opening up on him, and these guys tell you that, and I miss that part of it.
Frankly, I like the renegade aspect of tattooing, and I think a lot of artists and a lot of collectors want to make tattooing as acceptable throughout the world, and make it as acceptable. You can buy it in Target, and now their dream has come true, and look where it's gotten us. I've learned in my background in advertising and background, even in marketing in college and that sort of thing, the fastest way to kill anything is make it part of pop culture, and that's my biggest fear of tattooing.
Greatest words that you can hear when you're getting tattooed is when the tattoo artist says you're done. Wow, I'm glad it's the world's dumbest goddamn hobby. Sit down and let some bastard sting you to death. They get stung all over, you know.